Hi there, my name's Henry Bechelet and I'm the technical manager for ICL in the UK and Ireland, and I am joined in this video by Dr. Andy Owen, who is the international tech manager for ICL for Turf and Landscape. Okay, so this is the second installment of our series of technical update videos on the subject of integrated disease management, and in particular, the management of microdochium patch disease in the autumn. So far, we've covered the background to the disease to give us an understanding of kind of the conditions that favour its development, or maybe the reasons for severe attacks, etc. But this video is going to be about on the subject of what actually integrated disease management means. Okay, so quite often we would talk about integrated disease management, IDM or IPM, integrated pest management, or ITM, integrated turf management, as if everyone knows what we're talking about. You know, we sort of, just go straight into it with that kind of assumption. And it might not be that sort of everyone knows what integrated disease management is or means, or we think about it in the same way. So we thought that we'd start off by discussing that, so we all have the same frame of reference when we move through our later discussions. So, Andy, let's start with quite a big question. What is ITM? Now, have you got a definition for this, Andy? I've brought one with me. We've both done some homework. Do you want to read out your definition?
Yeah, so it is interesting. A lot of the classic turf textbooks talk about ITM or IDM or IPM, this integrated approach to managing diseases or pests, this sort of thing. And I could sort of use a mashup of, James Beard's turf management for golf courses, or, Burt McCarthy. Actually, that's a really good book, Best Golf Course Management Practices I Like. They both say similar things. They say sort of integrated pest management involves your proper species selection. It involves the correct cultural practices. It involves the monitoring of the pest and your environment, and then also the judicious use of appropriate plant protection products. Okay, so that would be that sort of formal definition for turf, but it is a bit vague. But how does that compare with yours? What have you got?
Well, I'll read out mine and then I'll tell you where it's from.
Okay.
Okay. It's a little bit wordy, so don't fall asleep. Okay, so integrated pest management, IPM, or we could sort of say ITM,
Yeah.
or disease management, is an effective and environmentally sensitive approach to pest/stroke disease management that relies on a combination of common sense practices. Okay. IPM programs use current, comprehensive information on the life cycles of pests or diseases and their interaction with the environment. This information, in combination with pest disease control methods, is used to manage pest damage by the most economical means and with the least possible hazard to people, property, and the environment. So I quite like that one. That is the
Where's that from?
EU. Yeah, that's the EU development of integrated pest management. Just to be really controversial. No, it's not controversial at all. It's quite a nice, rounded, balanced kind of definition.
Yeah.
Still vague, but
Yeah.
almost like setting the scene that that it's about, for me, I'm taking away that it's about a complete understanding of the situation rather than sort of relying on pesticidal methods.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
actually takes a rounded approach.
Yeah, that's right. And I've attended a lot of talks on this sort of topic, and they always start with that integrated approach or these sorts of definitions.
Yeah.
When I used to teach it myself, you'd always start there. And very often then you'd lead into this sort of, I don't know, this framework called the sort of the pest triangle or the disease
Yes.
pyramid,
Yes.
and talk about those, because every disease outbreak ideally needs a number of things to be happening. You need
Okay.
host susceptibility, you
Right.
need an active pathogen that's present, you need
Okay.
the right environmental conditions,
Yes.
and those three would add up to give you your disease triangle. And then you add on to that the aspect of time, because they will develop through time. So you form this sort of disease pyramid,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
should allow you to set a framework to any sort of
Yeah. I mean,
integrated approach.
that's the reasons why a disease outbreak would occur, isn't it? And and that's your starting point, because once you understand those reasons,
Yeah,
you could maybe instigate common sense practices that
yeah,
that sort of reduce the sort of likelihood of the attack developing. So okay, so fine. If we look at those kind of three factors that need to be in place, let's relate this to microdochium patch disease.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what was the first one? Host susceptibility.
Host susceptibility, and obviously we're aware, microdochium will affect a range of turf species, with Poa annua being particularly susceptible in the sward. So, if you have Poa dominant swards, you could expect to be managing microdochium outbreaks at some stage, during the season.
Yeah, not everyone's got per dominant swords. There is the whole sort of idea that if you have different grass types in your greens or in your
Yeah,
turf or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
that it
yeah.
would be less susceptible. So that's kind of one avenue that maybe we'll talk sort of later on.
Mm,
We've got the sort of pathogen activity. Microdochium nivale is ubiquitous
yeah.
and very quick acting, I would say.
Yeah, it's sitting there in the thatch, isn't it? It's waiting for the right conditions to appear for it to start to develop. So, yeah, it'll be there. Yeah,
Yeah, okay, and then after sort of the sort of background discussions previously, we've got a sense of those environmental conditions that would favour the development of the disease.
yeah,
It's kind of like in the UK and Ireland, it's a kind of autumn disease, isn't it? So it's mild, damp conditions, but it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
just
yeah.
autumn; it's mild, damp conditions.
Whenever
Um,
you see those through the year, yeah, absolutely. That
yeah,
level of humidity in the canopy, or that moisture sitting on the leaf, and then suitable temperatures to allow the development of that disease. Yeah,
Yeah, and the problem that we've got in the sort of UK and Ireland is actually sort of in the past when I started my agronomy career, you could kind of guarantee that sort of in November, for instance, or the end of October, you'd get winter would arrive with
yeah,
these
yeah,
low temperatures that would not be conducive to microbial patch, and so the disease. The period of pressure for the disease was quite short-lived, but
yeah,
now with the sort of climatic patterns that we're experiencing at the moment, we're getting autumn right from September through to April. So we're getting this kind of really long period. This time frame that you were
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about also is just so much more elongated to make the sort of the pressure period so much longer, but also the likelihood of a sort of damaging outbreak developing so much more sort of likely. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to link to some trial work in a future one of these videos that showed microdochium development running on this sward right through from September and increasing right the way through to March with no let up through the whole sort of 6-month winter period.
Okay, so let's just kind of touch on those kind of manageable aspects. If integrated turf management is managing the situation so that, first of all, it's managing the situation so that it's sort of less likely to develop disease. We've got a few things that we can manage. We've got sort of plant health, so nutrition is one
Yeah,
thing. We've
important.
got moisture management, and we've got um, I don't know what it would be. It would be sort of aeration and stuff like that. So let's kind of like just very quickly talk about the importance of nutrition, for instance.
Yeah. Yeah. We see, in all the trial work we do about managing microdocium on turf, and we've run a lot of trials on this subject. We always have a control plot, and the control plot would be that plot that doesn't get any nutrition through the pressure, and we always see more microdocium in the control plot than our treatment effects, or certainly at the highest extent coming on earlier and increasing quite quickly. So sensible nutrition through that autumn period. If we're seeing growth, the turf will need some nutrition to remain healthy whilst it is growing, and so something needs to be supplied. Slow release granular or a small amount of liquid nutrition applied to that period would be perfectly sensible.
And sort of moisture management, we've always swished the greens to remove the dew, for instance. Moisture's, really important for the development of all fungal pathogens. So,
Yeah.
so dew removal and general moisture management is another thing that we can employ. Just kind of good cultural practice to kind of,
Yeah.
light would be one thing, and kind of shading and airflow. These would all be sort of integrated sort of tactics that we might deploy. So sensible nutrition, good moisture management, and sort of just general
It's
environmental stewardship would be what we're talking.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of what we're talking about is good traditional common sense
Yeah,
greenkeeping. And
yeah,
it's often been said that integrated turf management or integrated disease management is just traditional greenkeeping done well. I don't know
yeah.
whether you have an opinion on that. Be
Well,
interested
it
to see.
does sort of like, the traditional greenkeeping values kind of that are commonly sort of recited do sort of, are sort of in this area. Integrated disease management is not a
Yeah,
new thing, but I don't buy that it's kind of like going back to the good old days with our sort of minimal approaches. I think integrated turf management, as the sort of EU um, definition said, is sort of using current comprehensive information and
yeah,
understandings to sort of manage the situation. Because the fertilizer technologies have changed. We've
yeah,
got lots of moisture management technologies, and we've got lots and lots and lots of trial work, which we'll talk about in the future, that sort of shows you kind of the effectiveness of not just sort of taking a sort of laid back approach, but actually using very specific technologies in very specific ways, using the right timings, for instance. So I don't buy that it's traditional management. I think ITM is the most modern form of
yeah.
turf management. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I would agree completely. I always have in my head that it is making use of the technologies that are available to you. And so that would include, as Bert McCarthy says, judicial use of the right plant protection
Yeah,
product if it's available. We keep the plant healthy for as long as we can, but an application of fungicide, say for Microdocium nivale, applied preventatively at the right rate at the right time, will give you an immense amount of protection, which will, keep your surfaces clean and allow you to maintain, a high quality of turf. And, if they're available, we need to think about using them. So, yeah, I would
yeah.
agree.
Yeah, it's a good point. Fungicide technologies are a part of an integrated approach. There's no two ways about it. They're the things that actually kill the pathogen, whereas sort of
Yeah,
the background cultural management is essentially, if it's done well, is slow. It may be slowing the rate of development of the disease down by creating a less conducive environment. But
yeah,
if you want
yeah.
to sort of kill the disease, which I think you do over this kind of long 7 month
Yeah,
autumn we're
yeah,
experiencing these days, you have to zero it out at certain points. Fungicides are a part of that, but that judicious thing, none of
yeah.
us want to overuse plant protection products.
No,
We
no,
want
no.
to use these technologies, in as an efficient way as possible. And certainly we shouldn't be dismissing fungicide technologies at all, or
Yeah,
viewing them in a bad way, really. They're the most regulated part of
yeah.
the industry that we have. So,
And I've got a
okay.
great example of that, in a future episode, talking about some trial work that shows exactly what you've said really clearly.
Okay. So, all right. So we sort of understand that integrated turf management is kind of bringing our understanding to bear and using good common sense management practices. It's not theoretical, it's a
Yeah,
management
yeah.
kind of thing. How do we put sort of integrated disease management into practice when it comes to microdosing patch disease? What
Mm.
are the things that we need to be thinking about?
I've always thought about this as setting short-term goals and long-term goals in integrated turf management. And, you know, the long-term goals need to be there. We need to have an understanding of how we want to move. And so they would encompass things like, you know, the changing of the environment around our golf greens, you know, opening them up to light and airflow, to installing an efficient drainage system or updating our drainage system so that we can keep the surface dry, you know, managing your thatch so that we haven't got that development of organic matter on the surface. And, you know, dare I say it, looking at, you know, converting the species to less susceptible plant types, you know, that
Yeah.
has got to be part of it. But, you know, we can recognize that none of those are very, very simple to do, and they all have steps that need to be done. And so they're ones to consider, but we can set short-term goals as well, which is more about managing on a season by season basis and thinking about our pinch points in the season and how we are best prepared for them, you know, monitoring the environment, using the tools that are available to us to understand when we might see disease development, and trying to keep our plant as healthy as possible going into those times. You know, using the technologies that are available to us, planning an integrated program to get us through that timescale for that season, but all in the while, you know, sailing towards this destination where we're improving the overall environment of the turf. And really, you know, I don't know whether I've answered your question there, but that's the way that I think about this approach.
Yeah, yeah, and then you just and you sort of choose the correct fertilizers. You employ moisture management. I mean, we were sort of saying before we started this, really, you know, do we call it ITM,
Yeah,
IDM? And I kind of think, you know, integrated disease management is a part of the management strategy. But when you kind of think about it, you know, your disease management strategy is 365 days a year. Your
yeah,
autumn
yeah,
disease management starts on January the 1st, doesn't it? With everything that you're doing, just to create that right balance. You might bring in certain things at certain times, like sort of dew dispersants or whatever it is,
yeah,
the use of
yeah.
slow release nutrition, whatever fungicide. You know, to coincide with certain periods of disease pressure. But essentially, you know, is ITM, isn't it? Is that everything
Yeah.
that you do is trying to resolve, is trying to be connected with sort of everything else. So yeah,
That's
no, it's very
exactly
good.
right. Exactly
Dare we
right.
talk, Andy, dare we talk about grass types? You know, I mean, I remember in
We should.
2006 when we had the
You're the man.
sustainability debate. No, when we had the sort of sustainability debate, and grass types were the center of the argument, weren't they?
Yeah, yeah,
And, you know, quite apart from what we think, first of all, I would sort of say on that clearly grass types may have a massive influence in terms of the susceptibility to disease, you know, that host susceptibility. You know, if we can move, or if we could move away from annual meadowgrass dominance to brown top bear, whatever it is,
yeah, yeah,
blah blah
yeah.
blah. It doesn't matter what it is, you know.
Take those
You will get
steps.
less. You'll get less, way less disease. The only time that we've achieved zero disease through an autumn without the use of fungicides in one of our trials was when there was a brown top bent dominant.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
the untreated control plots got 12, 13, 15%, got quite a severe attack of disease. But when we put on our plant health, moisture management, and sort of the use of iron once, I think it was, we got zero disease. But that was because it was on a brown top bent. It was fully integrated.
yeah.
Now, the problem that we've got here is, you know, and I wrote a load of articles and all this, which I kind of stand by. Um, I do. It's that it's not easy. It really isn't easy to achieve a sword transformation. So, you know, I
Yeah,
think we're going to have
yeah,
to sort of leave it at that and just sort of say we need to do more work on that, because actually, you know, if the future is that we sort of have less fungicides,
yeah,
and it may or
yeah,
may not be the case, then
yeah,
we're going to
yeah.
need to be able to transition swords if we don't want them to get blitzed during the
You're quite right. And
during
I
the
mean, there's probably no one path to take to transition your sword as well, and that
no.
adds complexity. There's a range of things that need to be done and got right. I think your articles are a great place to start if you're thinking about it. But again, they don't provide that step-by-step guidance. So there's a lot to consider, but it's a journey that is worth taking, I think, if we want to manage in a truly integrated way, provide the best services. We have got to think about that.
It's the elephant in the room, isn't it? And it's got almost like, because there was such an argument about it last time, that people are almost like afraid to talk about it this time. Or maybe sort of people did try and didn't succeed and kind of feel like
quite
it's
ready.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah, I think that's part of it. But yeah, we do need to do some work on that, because I think that's got to be sort of one of the answers for the future. Okay, so how do we finish this? In terms of sort of, hopefully we're on the same page when it comes to sort of integrated turf management, that we're using our understanding of the situation to be able to manage it through using sort of techniques that sort of seek to manipulate the environment in a favorable way. There's lots of different things that you can do, and essentially there's every single day of the year forms a part of your overall plan. But what we're going to talk about when we sort of move on is some quite simple trial work, where we sort of put these ideas into place in really simple ways, and hopefully you can sort of see that there are very simple, practical, common sense practices that you can employ that are really effective if you just go about it in the right way. This isn't sort of high science. This is practical management. And hopefully we'll see as we move forward, the practical application of integrated disease management practices is simple, and it can be really effective. Okay,
and we've got
so
really good data to present. So, there should be really interesting sessions to focus on.
Brilliant. Okay, so thank you, Andy. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Henry.
Keep an eye out for the future episodes, and we'll catch up with you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Cheers.